Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Kamwenja AA wash processed Kenya from the Picky Chemist. And there's the bag right there. And the Picky Chemist, based out of Chaudfontaine, Belgium. And they've quickly become one of our most featured European coffee roasters on this channel. And that is largely because they do remain one of the most popular coffee roasters among you guys as well. We picked this coffee up from Airworks as part of one of their special releases, and as long as Airworks is going to continue to bring in the Picky Chemist, we're going to continue to review their coffees. That being said, this one did not necessarily sound like my type of coffee, but given how popular the Kenyan coffees from the Picky Chemist are, we decided to pick this one up anyway, and it'll be interesting to see how it turned out, as this right here is day 55. And one quick note on the recipe for this coffee. Recently, the Picky Chemist has included a brew guide with their most recent releases. That being said, they didn't include it for either of the two coffees that they released this time around. But the recipe we went with for this coffee was our standard recipe, which is a 16:1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 96 degrees Celsius, about 205 degrees Fahrenheit. And I like this one best through the V60, which does indicate a more medium fine grind. Roast profile for this one, this is one of their filter offerings, which does indicate it is about as light as they do go for their coffees. That being said, it is pretty well known that the Picky Chemist is one of the lightest roasting coffee roasters out there, so this one is on par with our previous experiences with this coffee roaster, which are some of the lightest out there. So for that reason, we can say that this one skews on the extremely light side of things by most standards and metrics. With all that out of the way, let's go and start discussing this coffee. Day 30, first impression. So about this time, we're giving these coffees about 4 weeks worth of rest, and if we can extend that a little further, then it's ideal to probably start it on that day 30 mark. So we did, opted for the V60, and the very first thing noticing was that this coffee already had a pretty nice level of intensity, skewing expectedly in the red sense in terms of the fruit and floral qualities, relatively cleaner and sweeter than most of the other Kenyans that we've had from the Picky Chemist in the past, with also a fair bit of some savory tomato qualities nonetheless. So this coffee from this first impression was very straightforward, and we've reviewed so many of the Picky Chemist's coffees up to this point that we usually have a pretty good idea of what to expect from their coffees right at the forefront, but having this one offer a little bit more intensity was definitely a nice change of pace, so I did have a lot of optimism for this coffee going forward. Day 33 through the Chemist, and the coffee was a fair bit less impressive this time around, as there's significantly more of the savory tomato-like qualities with a little less cleanliness as a result, and it was once again pretty direct, but this impression was a little bit more okay overall, and that's what I was kind of concerned about with this coffee. I've said in the past that when it comes to one specific origin that I don't mind if it's maybe a little bit more developed, it's usually Kenyan coffees, given that the lighter the Kenyan coffees are, usually the more tomato-like characteristics I do get from them, and this one was definitely offering a lot of that from the second impression. It's going to be interesting to see if we got that going forward, as on day 36 we opted for the UFO brewer, and it was similar to the first impression, offering plenty of intensity and sweetness with a nice combination of savory and herbal qualities in both the tomato and rhubarb-like sense. Expectedly bright once again, as it's pretty well balanced with plenty of body and texture. Traditional red berries once again, pretty straightforward once again, but I would say better this time around, so we went ahead and moved on to day 39 through the V60 with a recipe that's closer to what we usually see from the Picky Chemist. So the recipes we've seen from them in the past skew somewhere between 92 degrees Celsius and 95 degrees Celsius, and usually at the lower concentration, somewhere between a 16.67 to 1. So that's what we went with, 16.67 to 1 at 93 Celsius. And the coffee was the best it had been to this point, as it continues to offer great balance between sweetness, clarity, brightness, but still plenty of the classically red fruit forward experiences and a more prominent rhubarb-like quality. So very straightforward. If there's one thing I can say about this coffee, it is very direct, it is very straightforward, it is very Kenyan in so many ways. Day 42 through the Chemist with the same adjustments, and the coffee is still nice, offering an above average level of cleanliness, sweetness, and intensity for a Kenyan coffee without sacrificing any of the brightness or traditional Kenyan qualities. Pretty direct again, with plenty of the complementary citric brightness, so in a slightly grapefruit and lime-like sense. I do believe lime was one of the notes that they had here for this coffee, which definitely made a lot of sense given that there was an abundance of citric qualities to it. Day 45 through the V60 with the same recipe. So we went back to it again, and a slightly more fine grind. And the coffee was notably more tomato forward this time around as well, with plenty of prominent red fruit qualities. was very direct once again with a strong traditional Kenyan-like experience in a bright red fruit sense. So this right here was not necessarily the best experience that I'd had as of this moment. I'm looking through my notes because there was one day specifically I was getting a very interesting cucumber-like feel, and I'm kind of surprised I didn't notate that in here, but I think it was actually the upcoming day on the day 48. So essentially what had happened was, and this is kind of stupid, I had cucumbers for lunch, and I don't want to say shortly after that, but the next cup of coffee I had after that was this Kenyan coffee from the Picky Chemist, and I could taste so many cucumbers from it. And I didn't really want to write that down, largely because I couldn't tell if it's because I ate cucumbers or if this coffee actually had a cucumber-like characteristic, but it was very pronounced. And I said, it's been so long since I've actually had the cucumbers. It was like an hour and a half, 2 hours, that I was surprised I was still tasting it within this coffee, but it was worth notating nonetheless. So on day 48, we opted for the Chemex with the same adjustments, and it was actually a nice day today, providing a slightly cleaner presentation, but still super Kenyan-like once again, with the overall red tone skewing in both the floral and fruit scents. Very long-lasting finish with vibrant tart berry qualities, as well as a very prominent citric bitterness as well. On day 51, final notes we have back to the V60 with our standard recipe, and it was on the better side today, as it still does have plenty of the prominent savory tomato-like characteristics to it once again, with notable intensity and a very long-lasting finish, which will be demonstrated within our tasting wheel here shortly. Red fruit forward yet again with a complementary hibiscus and plenty of citric qualities as well. And I don't want to say that this coffee was extremely predictable by the end, but I think if you would have told me that you were going to give me an extremely light profiled Kenyan coffee that was very traditional, that's kind of the way that I would have expected this coffee to turn out, and it's very much the way that this coffee did turn out for me. All right, so let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. And I don't know if I actually want to pull up the Picky Chemist tasting wheel. I've done so in our previous Picky Chemist reviews, but I think for this one we might skip it, but we will go through this tasting wheel and I'll kind of try to remember what I saw on the Picky Chemist tasting wheel as we're going through this one. So we do have one level 5. It is the finish level 5. When it comes to Kenyan coffees, I've said that it's extremely rare for them to score lower than the level 4, but this one right here has a very lingering, long-lasting finish. I can taste a lot of those savory qualities. I can taste a lot of those long-lasting red qualities to this one, much more so than even the average Kenyan coffee. And given that one of the slight grievances I've had with the Picky Chemist's coffees in the past is that the wash processed coffees can be a little tame at times, this one was by no means tame, and this one definitely had an extended finish to it. So level 5 is where we opted to score that. Definitely plenty of lingering Kenyan-like characteristics within this coffee. All right, let's go through the level 4s. We'll start with the sweetness level 4. I do know that the sweetness at a level 4 on their tasting wheel, and this one does skew on the sweeter side of things, even for a Kenyan coffee, which is a win for me. I think if I'm going to get a very bright and slightly tomato-like Kenyan coffee, then at the very least it can be on the sweeter side of things, and I definitely got a little bit more of some sweetness to the overall experience within this coffee, so that works just fine for me. Acidity level 4. I mean, it's expectedly bright. I've also said that if it doesn't score a minimum level 4, then something went horribly wrong, but this one was definitely very bright. And it's going to be kind of interesting. The other coffee we're discussing from them is, of course, the other release they had, the La Noria, and that one has a different sort of brightness to it, but this one's much more traditional in the Kenyan-like sense. It still did score that level 4 mark. I don't really think that there's too much to add upon that. Very vibrant red fruit, red berry qualities. Florality level 4, I think it skews a little bit more in the hibiscus-like sense. There's a pretty prominent herbality to this one, which I don't really think is unexpected. I think that they also had the floral quality on the higher side of things. I know they had the acidity at the level 4, but I know they had the herbal side also a little higher, so that's why we have the spice there at that level 3 mark. I've heard from the only other person that I've discussed this coffee with that they got a very prominent, unusual, and kind of hard to describe savory sense to it, which I've said it's pretty straightforward tomato for me. One day there was that strange cucumber, but I chalked that up to a little bit of an anomaly. So level 3 is where we opted to put that spices. It definitely has something a little different in that sense that makes it unique in comparison to your average Kenyan coffee. Berry fruit level 4. It's really surprising to me once again that they score the berry fruit, the red fruit at that level 2 on their tasting wheel. I do remember that part because we continue to keep scoring these Kenyan coffees at that level 4 mark, and I'm not entirely sure why they don't as well, given that I think one of the descriptors they had was red berries. This one's very red berry forward. It's presented in that tart sense, so you're definitely thinking a lot along the lines of the currants and cranberries. definitely pretty prominent and abundant within this coffee, and that's why it's no surprise it did score that level 4 mark. But equally as prominent was the citric qualities to it, and I mentioned that they were presented in a slightly bitter sense, so definitely thinking a little bit more along the lines of the lime and grapefruit-like characteristics to it, so that's scoring pretty high. Let's go ahead and move on to the level 3s, and we have 3 of them that are worth discussing. So the first one is the savoriness level 3, and you know what, we'll skip forward to the body. Body level 3, plenty of texture. I do believe that they had it somewhere between a 3 and a 4, which I can definitely see. It's definitely on the higher side of body for us as well. Of course, it's a Kenyan coffee, so it has that juicy Kenyan-like experience to it. But we'll discuss these last 2 things side by side, cleanliness and savoriness level 3. I remember from the description, they highlighted that this coffee offers exceptional cleanliness or clarity, however they described it. But I've said in the past that if a coffee is going to be this tomato forward, which it was, you can see the savoriness there at the level 3 mark. It's really hard for me to score the coffee there at the level 4 mark, unless the rest of the coffee is extremely well defined. And this one's very straightforward in the Kenyan sense, but given that there's that very strong tomato characteristic to this coffee, which bumps the savoriness all the way up there to level 3, it's really hard for me to keep the cleanliness at the level 4. So I bumped that down. I mean, this coffee, if you don't mind that tomato-like characteristic, is definitely going to be on the cleaner side for you. But for me, it's usually a little bit of a hindrance when it comes to the cleanliness. So we kept that there at the level 3 mark. Outside of that, though, pretty straightforward. As I'm looking at this tasting wheel, I do think it is a pretty good representation of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. I already know that there's a number of people out there that are going to say that this is one of their favorite Kenyan coffees they've had this year, that this coffee is exceptional, it's spectacular, because I know enough people out there in the world that love these type of Kenyan coffees. But I've never enjoyed these Kenyan coffees whatsoever. As soon as you score a level 3 for a savoriness within a Kenyan coffee, I'm a little bit out on those coffees. I do not like tomato in my coffee whatsoever, and I know a lot of people feel the same way, but Kenyan coffees have 2 camps. There are those that really love the savoriness, the kind of classic Kenyan qualities to this coffee, the bright red berries, the brightness of it, just the very intense savory qualities to this coffee. And then there are those that look for the more like stone fruit like experiences to it, the candied experiences to it, kind of that cherry candy quality to those coffees. And that's the type of Kenyan coffees that I prefer. So I went into this one maybe hoping that it would be a little bit more along the lines of my own preferences, but truth be told, this is not my Kenyan coffee. But once again, I already know a ton of people are going to say that this is one of the best Kenyan coffees that they've probably ever had. So for those people, that's the type of person that I would suggest this coffee to. It's extremely traditional when it comes to a Kenyan coffee. It offers an abundance of those red fruit qualities. It offers an abundance of those tomato-like characteristics. It has everything that you're looking for in that sense, with a little bit more sweetness and an even more extended and long-lasting finish. So obviously take the profile in mind given just how light this coffee is, and then combine the rest, plenty of that body to it, plenty of the brightness to it, plenty of the red fruit characteristics, plenty of the citric qualities, and that's the type of person I would suggest this coffee to, and also the best way I can leave this review. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Kamwenja AA Wash Process Kenya from the Chemist. Thank you for watching.